One more time. Kobe!
Kobe! Kobe! Kobe! Kobe! Kobe! Kobe! Kobe! Kobe!
All right, welcome to episode 1 of Bean, a podcast dedicated to Kobe Bryant's greatest games. I'm Jeff Frailer. The other host is Brandon Rosenthal. We just decided to do this because we're just huge Kobe fans, huge Los Angeles Laker fans. From everything I've been looking for on the internet, it doesn't seem like anyone else is doing a podcast specifically dedicated to Kobe Bryant games. So hopefully this fills some sort of void that, people who are nostalgic as we come on the 1-year anniversary of his death for Kobe Bryant content. Brandon, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Jeff. I'm doing really, really good. I'm glad we're taking this trip down memory lane. And, like you said, there is not a lot of podcasts about Kobe Bryant games. There's a lot of videos out there on YouTube about Kobe Bryant games and, awesome clips. But really diving into his special performances, I'm very excited to do that. So.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to be covering some of his greatest games. I mean, at some point, I'm sure we'll do the 81, Game 7 versus Portland, 62 3/4 versus Dallas. But I think another thing that really appealed to both of us was doing games that, people remember, but that's really stick out for one reason or another. This could be, regular season ho-hum games in January and March and kind of the, slower parts of the season as everyone's looking forward to the playoffs. But for whatever reason, Kobe took it up a notch that night, or maybe it was something that happened with the opponent. These games stick out. These games are something we want to talk about.
And to piggyback on that real quick, like if you've been watching Laker games and if you watch majority of Kobe's career, there were a lot of nights where he was the only person who gave a damn. Mm-hmm. And that equated to some awesome performances that we have probably forgotten, 20 years, and we're all getting older now. So I forget things every single day, but there's some things I can't forget about Kobe, and this podcast is going to trigger some of these memories for all of us, I feel. So I'm looking forward to it, man. Anything Kobe, I'm all in, as you can tell by my outfit.
Right, yeah. We are both in Kobe jerseys. Brandon's rocking a 2009 Finals edition jersey. I have just a regular gold 24 Swingman. So I had a plethora of jerseys to select from. This is what I went for episode 1.
Was it like that, like Eddie's closet in Whoopi Goldberg's closet in that movie Eddie, where she's going through all those Knicks jerseys? Like, which one do I wear today?
That is, I probably haven't seen that movie in at least 20 years, but it deserves a rewatch at some point. That's a good one.
Oh man, yeah. If it was a Lakers movie, maybe we watched it a lot more. But since it's a Knicks movie,
Yeah, right. So this is also something that, I hate to kind of touch on this. Let's say Kobe was still here. I think I would still want to do it, but I don't know if it would still be like the same angle or, kind of the same content. But I think the fact that he's not, that we're, basically at the 1-year mark of his passing, it's something I definitely wanted to do. I've still been, not daily, but probably close to it, like looking up some of his highlights on YouTube from various stages of his career, reading the comments. And, if there's, to be able to establish a feed that will really go into a deep dive of these games from a fan's perspective. And I think what you and I have talked about is we're not going to waste a lot of time talking about the X's and O's and, the coverages of the Knicks, the coverage of the Lakers, wherever the game it is. We're just going to talk about, Kobe was a badass this game. The crowd added a certain element. The announcers added a certain element. This is why this particular sticks out. This is why this particular game sticks out to us, and really just focus on that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This is going to be from a pretty much fan's perspective. We can be like color commentators. We're going to see this game as that point of view. Like, this is exciting to us. What brought us to the TV, or in this new generation, what brought us to YouTube? You can watch so many things on YouTube now. So it's like, what was so exciting to you about Kobe? And there's so much. There's a plethora of moments.
Right. And I think it's so cool that the fact that we could do this, that anybody can do something like this. I was thinking about just my history of Laker fandom. So I grew up in Dallas. I grew up without cable TV and without the internet for like a large part of my childhood. And so I became a Laker fan when I was 10. My complete, exposure to them was through NBA on NBC games and whatever was written in the Dallas Morning News. So a lot of times these West Coast games, Not that this one was one, but like growing up, anytime there's a West Coast games, a lot of times that score did not make the Dallas Morning News because it ended too late. It ended past midnight our time. So like I was like 10, 11, 12 years old, no cable, no internet. I didn't know for like 2 or 3 days if the Lakers won a game sometimes. I had to wait till like the following day's newspaper to see what the score was. And
these kids don't know how good they got it, man.
Yeah, I know. And so now you can, pull out your phone and watch a game live. If something crazy happens, it's on YouTube. It's on House of Highlights within seconds, and you just have it in your pocket. And so for everyone who is not, waiting 2 days to find out simply if your favorite team won a game, I'm incredibly jealous.
Tell me about it. I remember my dad told me a story that he had to call like a phone number to find out what the score was. And that was like a repeating, line. So you would call and then have to wait for just pretty much wait for your sport. How things have gotten better. Now you get alerts, a notification saying, hey, the Lakers are close game, 2 minutes left. Like that's very, very good time to be a sports fan. But yeah, those are good old days, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So so everyone, first game, Lakers Knicks, February 2003, Madison Square Garden. Do you remember watching this game live, Brandon?
No, I don't remember watching this game live. I remember I don't think I watched it live because I saw the dunk. That's what brought me to this game.
Okay, absolutely.
Yeah. So but I know you watched it live because when we were meeting to discuss games, this game stuck out to you like it was one of the first ones that really stood out to you because of what you just stated. Like it was one of the first games you got to see on TV. And because, and look, because I grew up in LA, so I was able to watch Laker games pretty much, on KCAL 9. We didn't have to have cable. It was a local team back in the day. There wasn't really a lot of these contracts and that prevented fans from watching games. It was just on Channel 9, so I was able to watch a lot more games than you were growing up. So yeah, I don't want to sound like an arrogant Laker fan, but there's just a blur of like games stuck in there.
Absolutely. I do. Like you said, for whatever reason, this game has always just been, at the forefront if I'm thinking about like great Kobe performances. If there was a reason where I had to pick like, 5 games that I could rewatch, this would be one of them. It's a combination of being 16, having cable for the first time in my life, watching TNT games for the first time. The fact that he was insane. I think it was, 46 points this night, 17 for 27. The atmosphere in Madison Square Garden coupled with Kevin Harlan at the microphone. It was like a perfect mixture of something that could end up being so incredibly memorable.
And that was this was his first big MSG game, like really big. And we all think about MSG. We think about the 61. We think about like a lot of stuff. This was the first, aside from the 98 All-Star game. The 98 All-Star game was a special
that's
game.
A good point. Yeah.
Like that was a kind of him versus MJ. And it wasn't really like a big, this was like, hey, this is my stage. I know you're there, Shaq, but scoot your fat body over, and this is my time to shine. Shaq was a little large in this game, in this rewatch.
Oh yeah, he definitely was.
That jersey was snug, man.
Yeah, I think so. This was the season's coming into setting the stage for the Lakers this season. This part, Lakers were coming off 3 straight titles. 2002, they had beaten the Nets to complete the three-peat. They come into this season, 2002, 2003. Not overwhelming favorites to win the title, but definitely favorites, at least according to Vegas. Plus 180 odds to four-peat. Everyone is more or less expecting them to come out of the West. Maybe it's going to be Sacramento. It's going to be Sacramento or LA based off just how the previous season had ended.
Spurs were around there too. Who are the other favorites? But the Spurs, like the Nets, and maybe the.
Yeah, so the Dallas was probably. I think they ended up winning 60 games that year.
That's right. Dallas.
Yeah. So I don't know if everybody was expecting Dallas to win 60 that season, but they ended up doing that. But yeah, coming in, Lakers were favorites. But so this was this off season where Shaq had delayed his off season toe surgery. He said, if I got hurt on company time, I'm going to heal on company time. Got surgery the tail end of September and missed all of training camp, missed a good portion of the season. And the Lakers got off to a terrible, terrible start. They actually, this game, when they won this game versus the Knicks, they increased their record, I think, to 24-23. It was the first time they'd been over 500 the whole season. We're one game away from the All-Star break. Christmas Day probably was their low point of that year. They lost to the Kings at home, which was the first time they ever wore their white home jerseys, by the way, was that Christmas Day game in 2002. They fell to 11-19. That was their record after that loss.
That's bad.
Yeah. Shaq was back at that point. Kobe was gunning, to say the least, throughout the early part of the season. He had a game versus Boston where he was 17 for 47. They had
oh my God.
Yeah. So that was this season as well. And I think it was just a combination of no Shaq for a large part of the year, Kobe gunning to the point where it was occasionally to the Lakers' detriment. Lack of a real third option. I mean, Ori and Fox were a year older. I mean, Derek Fisher was there, but as much as everyone loves D-Fish, he's not going to go for 20 plus every night.
No, and when this team is so top heavy and you miss one of your, if not the most important player in your offense, you're going to struggle. Like, this team was not built for Kobe. It was built for Shaq to succeed, for the defense to get sucked in, to slow things down, for teams to foul. Like, this game was slow. Like, this pace back then was slow because of how many fouls were. Shaq just got fouled all the time. Yeah. And like, that is, if my coworker, my teammate said, I'll heal on company time, I think I'd shoot 40 shots a game too. I'd be like, okay, like, clearly they don't. And this was the beginning of the end, right? Like that.
Oh yeah. Definitely the beginning of the end for at least, I think, Shaq's physical prime. His first year in Miami, he bounced back and was an MVP candidate again, but you could see it this year. He was slowing down. Like you touched on, just his actual weight, conditioning was a factor. That jersey was looking pretty snug. He was laboring up and down the floor. But what's funny is about this game, if you watch just the first quarter, you get the impression it's going to be Shaqs Night.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he had 11 in the first quarter, 3 for 4 on free throws. He was engaged this game. He got set up for some early dunks, some early layups through. I know Kobe set him up a couple times. I think Ori did too. So he was animated. He was energetic. So you get the impression that it's going to be Shaqs Night early on.
No, you really do. And I think that was kind of the mindset, right? You saw, like, I wrote down here in a trivia. Do you know when Kobe's first shot was? This was a quick one because it's so early in the game. Do you remember what time? Like,
I don't remember. I feel like it was a jumper, like in the right corner, but a 2-pointer, or at least his first field goal. I don't know when his first attempt was. Do you mean his first field goal or attempt?
Yeah, his first field goal attempt was 7-minute mark in the game. Like, it took him 5, like, and that's not the Kobe we remember. It's like the Kobe. It was like the 7-second mark. And it's just like that was his role in the offense. Like, just, all right, I can post up, but there's another option. Shaq is going to post up too, and it was definitely Shaq's night. Like, he was, or at least in the first quarter, right? 4 for 5 shooting, dominant, and the Knicks had nobody to guard him. Like, absolutely nobody. They were shrimpy inside. Doliak was a miniature version. Othello Harrington, who I forgot even was on in the league. When I saw Harrington, I'm like, oh, is that Al Harrington? And I'm like, nope, wrong Othello Harrington. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember him. And he was just too small, like way too small. And so Kurt Thomas, like, they had nobody to guard him. So Shaq just feasted inside early on.
Absolutely. But yeah, so coming into this game, I know we touched on Shaq's dominance a little bit, but Kobe had really been picking it up the previous 4 games. So this particular game is the start of his 9 straight 40-point games. But he had gone for 35 or more in the 4 previous ones as well. So he came in on fire, and those were all Laker victories. But, like I said, this is the first of his 9 straight 40-point games. The Lakers go 7-2 in that stretch, and this really put themselves back into the playoff hunt. Like I said, they go into the All-Star break 1 game above 500. I think they were still in the 9th seed at that point. But, they were picking up steam, and it was just a foregone conclusion of they're going to get into the top 8. It's just a matter of where they're going to fall.
Yeah, pretty much like on the broadcast, Danny Ainge was like assuming they were going to be the playoffs. And then John Thompson's like, oh, I don't know. It's like, come on, John. Like, are you serious, dude? Like, these guys are going to make the playoffs. Like, he was trying to, stay calm. But yeah, it was just a foregone conclusion, like you're saying. Like, this team, now that they're back, and the only reason they were struggling is because Shaq was MIA, right? Now that he's back, they just need time to get acquainted. And once when Shaq plays himself into shape, this team is rocking and rolling. Like, and this game was a perfect evidence of what this team could do on the road in any house, like when they're rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. So not that the Knicks were, the best opponent for them to gauge themselves, but this was a competitive Knicks team. They didn't make the playoffs. They did win 37 games though, and they still had Latrell Sprewell. They had Allen Houston. Houston ended up getting hurt early on in this game, and he had a hot start, but then ended up getting hurt. So that aided the Lakers a little bit. But, like you said, this was a night that the Lakers could gain some momentum and, instill a little bit more fear into the Knicks and everyone else as they geared up for the All-Star break.
Yeah, and the Knicks were the number one 3-point shooting team in the league, and the broadcast mentioned that, and which is kind of wild to see when you look at their roster. You're looking at guys like, this doesn't look like the best 3-point shooting team in the league, but they were hitting threes. Like Sprewell started hitting threes, especially in the fourth quarter. Charlie Ward was hitting threes. And it's like it was just a surprising 3-point shooting team looking back, like especially the way teams are built today.
Yeah, you just touched on Sprewell, and they make note of this in the game as well. But so the previous game, he had gone 9 for 9 on 3-pointers. He hits 5 of his first 6 threes in this game. And I think it's Danny Ainge midway through the fourth quarter when the Lakers are making their run that he says, Sprewell's hit 14 of his last 15 3-pointers, which, anybody shooting in a gym by yourself 99.9% of the time, that's not going to happen. And the fact that this guy was doing it against NBA defenses was, I know it's just anybody can get hot, but it's still pretty incredible.
It was. And like, it's funny on the broadcast before we get into the Kobe thing, like they're like, oh yeah, the Knicks are about to trade him too. And it's like, this Knicks team is just so terrible. Like it's still very, very Knicksy. Like that is, if you're a brand new to basketball and you think like, oh, the Knicks are, no, they've always been, they've been the Knicks forever. Like very Knicksy things, terrible decisions, tons of talent. That's the Knicks.
Yeah. So the next thing I had on my list, now that we've kind of set the stage for what was going on this season in this game, is our most memorable plays. So I know there's some favorites that people are going to jump to immediately, but what are some of your most memorable plays now that you've rewatched this game?
Okay, so I have there's like 7 that really stood out to me that I just wrote them down, and I'm not gonna go through a lot, but the first one was this like Kobe crossing shot in the first quarter. It was about 4:49 left. And so we'll put these, when we cut up these clips, and we'll show you where he's at on these YouTube clips. So it's gonna be nice and easy when you listen. It was like a very Jordan-esque. It just reminded me, it was a cross and a pop. I was like, damn, it was just, the footwork was so nice. And I'm not describing it the way like it should be, because it was just so explosive, right? It was just like a drive, stop, jump, elevate. It so smooth. That was one. And this, I'll save the third quarter because for you, I want you to dive into the third. But one of them was this Shaw lob to Kobe right to start the second quarter. Yeah, that was super nice. Like that was like a perfect like transition. Shaw, the Shaw Shaq redemption. Remember that? From right. And then Shaw started throwing like, oh, Kobe can jump higher, so he would just throw it up there, and the mom would just go up there and get it.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously in the second quarter, this is the reason why I even love this game. It's the dunk over Sprewell.
Right.
That was a very great segment of plays, which we'll get to in a little bit. But that was Kobe on the corner, and you guys probably remember this. And it's Kevin Harlan is the perfect announcer for this play. And Kobe has a ball if you're watching this game, he's on the right wing, blows by Sprewell, and then does this windmill under the rim dunk, and then stands there and like does a mini flex. Has no emotion in his face, and then walks back on defense.
Right.
And then Kevin Hart is like, he does that with no regard for human life.
Yeah.
It was the most explosive play I think Kobe's ever done up to that point. And to do it in MSG, and then the MSG was like, the crowd was like, oh, and that's one thing you miss about games, and about today, like that the crowd, especially at the Garden, was always crazy. It was always like, they're basketball fans, even if the Knicks suck, and the Knicks haven't won championships in the 70s, so they're just going to watch good basketball. That play, they were just like, oh, and then it was buzzing. Like it was, to me, like obviously that was the top play of the game, like, but man, it's good stuff.
Yeah, that dunk, I think you just touched on it with the crowd. And with so many of Kobe's field goals this game, like as soon as it goes in, everyone's just like, oh. And it's I know everyone there, and as somebody who's grown up outside of Los Angeles has seen them in a number of cities, Laker fans travel and they live everywhere. So there's always going to be a solid amount of Laker fans in any arena. And so I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a lot of Laker fans who are making that noise. Maybe it's just a collective group of people who are amazed by what's happening on the court. But it just seemed like they were reacting to every single Kobe shot, and it just added to the atmosphere. The announcers touched on it just with the electricity in the building, and that dunk really brought it home. And that one sticks out. I think if you ask anybody, like any knowledgeable Kobe fans, like top 5 dunks, top 10 dunks, like they're going to mention this one.
Yeah, this one, and I wish we had better high definition video of it. I know there are some good clips of it, but this one, it was just so quick and so bang bang. Just from the triple threat position was just it move was so explosive. Like you just forget. Like no wonder his Achilles ruptured at the end of his career, because he was doing plays like this every single game in practice multiple times, like blowing by guys. Like man, and you talk about Sprewell, like. A lot of times in the broadcast, they were like, Sprewell's a good defender. Sprewell's a good defender. And Kobe just like, see ya.
Yeah. Right.
See you later.
Yeah, he did explode. I think this season in particular was, at least in my opinion, like the start of his physical prime. And you could probably argue it's from, this is 2003 to maybe 2007 to 2008 is probably when he was his most explosive. And then, as he got older, we get to 2009, 2010, through the end of his career, he was mostly, not that he couldn't still get up, but he was relying a lot more on just the mental edge he had over people, like his positioning, his footwork, rather than just blowing by them like he does on this particular play.
Oh yeah, and even in the interview when the Craig Sager interviewed him at halftime, which is pretty awesome to see. And also, I wrote in my notes, it was really cool to hear like the little TNT bottom line, like da na 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 na, like that little alert, like that was just a cool retro little noise to hear, because I haven't heard it in freaking such a long time. That game was 17 years ago. Oh my gosh. But yeah, like even Kobe was saying like, oh yeah, coach wants me to open the offense now. And it's just crazy seeing like an offense not centered around the Mamba. Like, we look back and like, oh yeah, these offenses were not centered around guards. This triangle version was centered around Shaq and the movement of it, where the ball went. So yeah, that you can tell like this was the offense was allowing Kobe to go into his prime, and his physical prime was also entering. So it was like a perfect combination. Yeah,
exactly. And so I know the interview you're talking about with Craig Sager, and he does mention that, like Phil's kind of opened it up for me. And, in any Kobe interviews about this season, about this like 40-point streak, he talks about that a lot. He says, that the Lakers were struggling, obviously. Shaq's, hurting a little bit. It's hard to even get him up and down the floor. Like, I really need you to, feel empowered to initiate yourself and take over offensively when we need you to. And so that kind of resulted in this 40-point streak. Like I said, the Lakers go 7-2, get back into the playoff hunt. And then later on in the season, I think Phil asked him to dial it down a notch so Shaq would feel more like mentally engaged. Because Kobe didn't like that. There are a million interviews where he talks about it, but he says, Phil was telling him, if we're going to win a 4th title, we need Shaq to be engaged. He needs the ball. And so it kind of took away from Kobe's exploits, and it didn't even result in a 4th title. So that's just interesting that everything that goes into these streaks and these plays and these games is so calculated.
It really is. And to show you that you still got to work with your teammates and your coworkers, even if you don't want to. And people are sensitive, and Shaq was a sensitive person in his own way. And I think as the years go on, we're seeing that where it was more behind the scenes that he was sensitive, and not just, Kobe's a lot more blunt. And didn't understand that why isn't he on my level when it comes to working out or this or that, and he just didn't get it. And later in his career he did, but 2 alphas.
Yeah, right.
Extreme alphas. So please get us into this third quarter, because the third quarter is where the magic happens, man. This was
right. Absolutely. Well, so first off, I mean, we have that dunk on like you just mentioned, last minute of the second quarter, where we get the no regard for human life. But then another memorable play right after that is the three that Kobe hits right before the second quarter.
Yes.
So just because, I mean, like I touched on earlier, having Kevin Harlan on the mic and with his witty sayings. So we were just in this game, we were treated to, with no regard for human life, Kobe Bryant is an assassin, right between the eyes. And he also referred to Kobe as a flamethrower.
I wrote that too. Yes, he did.
Which ironically was my nickname for Chucky Atkins back in the day. But
Ooh,
that's a
nice.
story for another
time. Chuck. Shout out to Chucky.
Shout out to Forgotten Lakers podcast guest, Chucky Atkins. That was a good
That's
one.
right. That is right.
Yeah. So the three before halftime, and we'll touch on that again when we get to our most memorable sequence. But okay, the third quarter, with about 9:30 left in the third quarter, the Lakers get on a fast break. Kobe steals the ball. He ends up going about 1-on-3 and finishes with the left hand, with a lefty leaner that the announcers are just laughing at. They're like, "Did you see that?" And they just keep laughing. So that was a good one. Just, going 1-on-3, finishing with the left, and just having the gall to do that and the talent to finish it was pretty cool. What else? So go ahead.
No, he had two lefty plays in a row. He had that lefty finger roll where he split, and that was like a nice move. And then the lefty floater in the lane. Even before that, at 10:50 in the third, he missed that up and under. Remember that crazy bait? He drove by the other side of Sprewell. He's like, "Oh, you again? Yeah. Let me just get rid of you." And then he went up and under, and he missed the layup. And it was such a good play that the broadcast showed a replay of the miss. So like, yeah, look at this. This is what he's doing. And like Danny Ainge is like, I think he's just trying to do the most acrobatic thing on the court. That's what he's trying to do right now.
Oh yeah. That second one, that second lefty finish.
Oh man.
Danny, you just touched on it. Danny Ainge just says, "Oh my goodness, we can't even have a chance to talk because Kobe's putting on such a show."
Oh man, I wrote that in my notes too. It was such a good quote.
Yeah, exactly. 6:40 left in the third quarter. He's on the right wing, catches the ball just inside the 3-point line. He kind of reverse pivots away from Sprewell, and then in one motion launches, a deep three that rattles home. And the crowd and another reaction, and just it was all in one motion. Catching it, reverse pivot. No reason to shoot this except for that you're Kobe Bryant, and he drains it on the road in front of Sprewell. It's just leaves everyone laughing. It's just another reason it's so memorable.
And there's a couple quotes that in the third quarter that were great for me. Number one, I think it was right before that three. Ainge is like, "Oh, he might not pass this," and I thought that was like hilarious. Because we're all thinking it, and we're all like, we don't even want him to pass it. Like, just don't. Like, this was one of those moments where, and it happens with Curry, and it happens with like Clay, especially like when they get hot. Like, just don't give it up, please. Just shoot it every single time. There was a great quote from John Thompson. He's like, "Knicks fans are starting to chant for Kobe now." Then Kevin Harlan's like, "Would you?" And he's like, "No."
Yeah, right.
He's like, "No."
I wrote that one down too. Yeah.
I was like, "Oh man, that was pretty funny." And then the other one is they're talking about the MVP, right? And they're like, "Oh, Thompson's like, Chris Webber is the MVP, like for sure." Webber finished 10th.
Yep.
And then the MVP ended up being Duncan. It was KG, Kobe, T-Mac, and Shaq. So swinging a big old miss there for John Thompson.
Yeah, right.
You had two of the top 5 MVPs in that game on the Lakers, and he didn't even mention them in the process. They're like, "Oh, I think it's going to be Webber, maybe Kobe." It's like, come on, man. See Webb.
This is a season that a lot of Kobe fans point out to as a season where he probably could have won MVP. I think with the fact that they struggled so much, basically for half the year without Shaq, and only won 50 games. If they had gotten to that 55, 57 mark, maybe Kobe could have gotten closer. But I mean, regardless of not winning the MVP, it's one of his best seasons.
100%.
At least statistically, yeah.
Oh man, at the end of the third quarter, he had 40 points, and this game was over, dude. It was like a 30-point blowout at the end of the third. And this would look like a Kobe should, and even though he came out to start the fourth quarter, but it was more like going through the motions. Slava was out there. Anytime you see Slava, shout out to Stanislav, man. What did Chick Hearn used to call him? Medvedenko.
Yeah.
Good old Chicky, man. I never got his name right, but he was out there. Kareem Rush was out there to start the fourth. But that, the Kobe three, the right between the eyes, was with 4:45 left in the third. I forgot about that. And I know you mentioned that quote earlier before I jump back to the fourth quarter. And that was just a special third quarter performance. He ended up scoring 22 points, which matched the Knicks. And to be honest, if Shannon Anderson didn't score like 5 points in the last minute and a half, like the Knicks would have scored 17 points. Like he hit like a desperation three to end the shot clock, and then like a runner in the lane. So shout out to all these throwback players, man. It really,
I know, yeah, I love
like seeing like Howard Isley and Shandon Anderson,
Michael Joliak.
Because you look at we remember the Lakers, we remember Devin George, we remember like all these dudes. And also shout out to your dude Travis Knight, chilling on the Knicks bench.
Yep, he was glued to that bench like there was no tomorrow. But former Laker Travis Knight.
Well, hey, if Kobe's going off, I want to stay on the bench too. I'm like, I'm good. I don't want to go in.
Yeah, OT night. That was a good. Just listeners, real quick, touching on Travis Knight. So I did have him on the Forgotten Lakers podcast guest, and this is really kind of a crazy story. So the first time I reached out to him, I found his email online, and he responded like within a day or two. He wrote me like a short novel for why he wasn't up to doing an episode. I was just kind of surprised by the length. I was surprised by like the detail of answer, but he was so incredibly nice about it. He wasn't angry. He was like, I really appreciate this, blah, 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 but I'm doing X, Y, and Z now. I really love the Lakers. Like the last few years for us have been blah, blah, blah. Like, I was like, surprised he's giving me this much time. This is crazy. And so I waited like a year. I was like, that was just such a nice response. I'm going to try again. And the next time he goes, yeah, sure. Like I'm available Tuesday or whatever it was. It was just like a 180 and we were able to record.
He's probably been burned by a lot of people and a lot of people trying to maybe either make fun of him or exploit. Like, it's like this dude played in the NBA. Like, regardless of if he was good or not in the NBA, like he was still good enough to make the NBA. Like he played in an era where 7-foot dudes were a hot commodity. So, hey, he won championships. Played in the league. He signed multiple contracts. Not a bad life, dude. Not at
all. Yeah. Okay, so we've gone through a lot of memorable plays.
Absolutely.
And we have, stealing this from the Bill Simmons Rewatchables podcast, our most rewatchable sequence. This is incredibly easy to pick. The last minute 56 of the second quarter.
Yeah, last 2 minutes of the second quarter, easy money. Not even a question.
Absolutely. So here's a little rundown of what happens. Charlie Ward with kind of a crafty reverse layup. Kobe drives, dishes to Shaq for a dunk that like almost rips the basket down. It's shaking for like several seconds afterwards. Latrell Sprewell comes down, hits a three. Kobe does the amazing dunk we just spent a lot of time on, the Kevin Harlan with no regard for human life dunk. Othello Harrington comes down, hits a 10-footer. Ori comes back with a three. Sprewell hits a 20-footer. Ori alley-oop to Shaq. Again, the basket shakes for all 400 pounds that just hung from it momentarily. Devin George steals the ball and leads to Kobe's three right before the end of the half, where we get Kevin Harlan's right between the eyes. And that's 21 minutes. 21 points with no stoppage of play for 2 minutes, basically. That translates to 126 points scored in a quarter if they kept up that pace. Not that would ever happen, but just no stoppage of play, teams not missing. Every shot the last 2 minutes goes in. It's just YouTube the last minute 56, 2 minutes of the. If you're going to watch any part of this game after listening to this podcast, watch that sequence right there.
For sure, because and something that I wanted to add is the least watchable segment, which was the 2 minutes before that, which were the most boring 2 minutes of basketball I may have ever watched. It was all fouls. It was so bad. And you can see why the game is so different now. And so that's one thing when you rewatch some of these older games, if you're especially new to basketball, you're going to be shocked at the pace. If you have not rewatched these games, there's so many fouls. There's two big men at the same time. Like Samaki Walker is in the game.
Yeah.
He's called invaluable this game, Samaki Walker.
Yeah.
Right after he missed like a big old, he missed a hook shot off the backboard. He's like, oh yeah, he's an invaluable piece of the team. I'm like, I don't remember that. But it's just, that stood out to me, like just the pace of this. And especially 2 minutes before that, like it was so slow. I even wrote my notes, like this game is slow. 4:14 left in the second quarter. And then right after that, it picked up, like Charlie Ward really picked up the pace and the Lakers like, oh, okay, I guess we're going to have to finish this quarter strong. And that was the most rewatchable. I mean, aside from the most rewatchable Kobe part was the third quarter by far. Like, if you want to go strictly on Kobe plays, it was just like probably anywhere between like 9 and 5 minutes in the third quarter. It was all Kobe time.
Absolutely.
But like those 2 minutes of basketball were no commercial breaks, no fouls, no turnovers, well, a couple turnovers, but no stoppage of plays. Like that was very
No
smooth,
misses.
enjoyable basketball.
Absolutely. And so the last play leads to that Kobe threw right before the half. When Devin George steals it, Kevin Harlan mentions, like, we've done a lot of games in this building, but the buzz in this building right now is electric. And I think it was just to do with the sequence we're talking about. Kobe had been heating up, the dunks, the fact that nobody was missing, 21 points were scored in 2 minutes. It's just it's a fun rewatch and something that I'll watch over and over again for the rest of my life.
Oh, absolutely. And it's good seeing those Knicks jerseys with a little bit of black in them, like seeing the garden with fans in it again. It's cool. It's a cool throwback performance. And especially because this Knicks team, they didn't have a lot of superstars. So like they just tried hard, like they played hard.
Right.
And I forgot that. Who's the coach? Herb Williams of the Knicks?
I think it was Don Chaney at this point. I think Herb may have been on the bench as an assistant.
Man, it was good to see all those guys. It's a fun rewatch, especially if you grew up watching like 90s or early 2000s basketball.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll give a shout out to some other Lakers, and then we'll get into our trivia.
Let's do it.
So obviously, shout out to Shaq, 33 points, 11 for 15 on free throws. Was getting it done from the line. You know, that's funny about Shaq. This season was his career high in free throw percentage. He got it up to 62%, which, isn't great by any standard. But for Shaq, it was his highest free throw percentage since his rookie season when he shot 59%. And then he had gotten all the way down to the mid-40s. The very next year, he was back in the 40s again for the Lakers. And so the fact that he got to 62 and went 11 for 15 from this game was cool. Shout out to Slava just because he's fun to shout out. 2 points. I remember it was like a little crafty layup that he probably got fouled on, but they didn't call it. So shout out to Slava. We already gave T Knight his shout out. Anybody you want to give a shout out to?
This man, especially now you put me on the spot. I think I want to give a shout out to Kareem Rush.
Okay.
Man, I kind of miss. Yeah, his career was a little short with the Lakers. I wish he had a bigger career with us. It seemed like it could have been so much more. So
absolutely,
I want to give a shout out to Kareem because that moment in Minnesota was pretty special, or against Minnesota.
Against Minnesota, right. Yeah. Also, want to give a shout out to Brian Shaw when the Knicks made their little comeback in the fourth, where they got this down to I think 5 points late in the game. But while they were making their run, Shaw hit a 20-footer that kind of quieted the crowd for a minute and gave Lakers fans a little glimmer of hope that, okay, we're going to pull this out. He stopped that incredible run by Charlie Ward, Speedroll, Doliak, everyone who was on fire for the Knicks that fourth quarter.
Man, like if it wasn't for that Shaq block with like a minute and a half left, like this game was a lot closer than it should have been.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I'll give you a chance to ask me some trivia questions, and I have a few fun ones for you based off the Lakers and Knicks.
I already asked you one, but do you remember what shoes Kobe was wearing this game?
I have no idea.
They were Jordans. He was a free agent at the time, I believe. So
yeah.
Some black Jordans, and then I have two. Oh, I already asked you one, but one is a Laker trivia question, and the other one is a Kobe trivia question. They showed us on the broadcast. Do you remember how many points per game he was averaging? Not points. I'm sorry, minutes per game he was averaging.
For the season or for up to this point?
For the season up to this point.
Okay. I'm gonna say 41.
It was 41.9, which was third.
Oh my god!
Third. Like who's playing? It's probably McGrady and Iverson. I have to believe.
Yeah.
You know, like Iverson used to play like 42 minutes a game.
Yeah, it's got to be.
And a special shout out to Karl Malone, who wanted to call out Zion for not playing enough minutes, where he only played 32 minutes a game in his second season. So like Karl has no idea what he's talking about. Oh, God, it's so annoying. But yeah, so that's good. You got it right. Pretty much 41.
Yeah,
that's good enough. We're not going to round up here.
Okay.
And which is the one Laker player that didn't play in this game?
It's hard because I there are a lot of names on the roster, but I don't know if they were active or not at this point. So Slava played. I think Madsen played a little bit. Kareem Rush played.
Well, that's a good point because I don't know if he was active or not, but I just saw it was DNP in the box score.
Okay, so I think that means he is active. Tracy Murray?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool.
Tracy Murray. He was
Lakers
chilling,
guest.
He probably was like, I made a dinner reservation in New York. This is a nice night. Let me just watch Kobe take on the town, and then I'll go have some wine.
Yeah.
All right, what you got for me, man?
Okay, so one part of a basketball reference that's really fun, and I don't know how accurate it is, but they list it for several players are their nicknames. And it's the list of nicknames. Some of these I've never heard before. So I have some both Lakers and one Knicks. I'm gonna see by the nickname that's given.
Okay,
on
this is great. This is great.
If you can, okay. So for a Laker, whose nickname is Blondie?
Blondie?
Yes, I've never heard this before, except for on basketball.
Oh,
basketball.
Okay. And it was a Laker on this team, I assume, right?
Yes, he played in this game.
Fox?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it was Rick Fox, which is weird because he's got black hair. And,
yeah. I just
from.
assume it's because he's an actor and he probably did some stupid stuff and wore a wig, and they're like, okay, Blondie, that's you.
Whose nickname is Little Flying Warrior?
For the Lakers?
For the Lakers, yeah.
Okay, it's got to be a guard. I think.
Yeah.
I can't remember who the Lakers' backup point guard was at this point. Oh my God! Even though I literally just watched the game, I don't know who is it. Who? Tell me.
Apparently, it's Kobe Bryant.
Okay. I would have not guessed that.
I never heard it except for basketball.
Congratulations, Mamba. Another one.
Okay. Another nickname, the Eighth Man, Laker.
The Eighth Man. I'm gonna say Mark Madsen.
Nope. Also Kobe. I don't know if it's because his number was number 8 at this point, but that's, like I said, these are just crazy nicknames that are on Basketball Reference.
Are these editable?
For whatever reason. I don't know. Okay. Who's
man.
Just Warrior. So not Little Flying Warrior. That was Kobe, but who's Warrior?
Is that the Diesel?
Yes, it's Shaq. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's his name, right? I think Shaquille means like warrior or something along those lines.
So one Knicks nickname, Crazy Eyes. He played in this game.
Oh man, I didn't, because my nickname for Crazy Eyes was Popeye Jones, but I don't remember. I don't remember him on this team. Crazy Eyes. Othello Harrington?
No, Kurt Thomas.
Oh, for sure. That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, this was young Crazy Eyes too. I can see why they call him Crazy Eyes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and so Kurt Thomas, another quote that I have on my notes since you brought him up. John Thompson said he was having a quote unquote career year. So I don't know what kind of season that means for Kurt Thomas. It probably means just like season high and elbows to the chin, and hard picks.
I'm gonna look real quick. So I had Basketball Reference.
Oh, perfect. B-ball shout out, and another shout out to Basketball Reference.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'd do without you.
Okay, so he's up to 14 points a game this year, which would be a career high.
That is a career year.
Yeah, 14, almost 8 boards.
This was like a second season or something like that, or third season. It was a pretty young player.
Oh no, this was like his 8th or so.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
He had been hurt his first couple of years. Well, he was on the Heat, then he was on the Mavericks briefly. I actually remember that.
That's right. Yeah, because they were talking about him about his college stats. I'm like, is this like his 3rd season? Like, why are they talking about college?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, he averaged a lot in college. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, how about that? Career year, Kurt Thomas. Congratulations.
Career year, Kurt Thomas. Yeah. All right. Well, that's about it for episode 1 of Bean. We're going to be releasing these monthly as we talk about, like I said, Kobe's greatest games, and then some other games like this one that, some fans may not necessarily think of when they think of Kobe games, but ones that are definitely a fun rewatch.
Oh, absolutely. This was a fun game. I'm glad you recommended it. The third quarter was peak Kobe performance. It was really more like the second and third quarters were just like he turned it on, and it was just fun watching him cook. It's just something that if you're a Laker fan, that when he had the ball and he had it rolling, it was must-see TV. It really was. It was stop what you're doing. Twitter wasn't around back then, so there wasn't like there's like a Curry alert. Like there wasn't a Kobe alert, and there should have been, because when he got going, it was league pass, must-see TV, any angle, any shot, and this game was evident, right? Like he had everything: the lefty, the right, the three ball, the dunks. It was fun to watch.
Yep. Cool. All All right, thanks. Well, we're looking forward to episode 2. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Anchor. We'll see where else we get this done up. Also, follow us on Instagram at Bean Podcast. That Instagram is up and running. Thank you, Brandon, for getting all the legwork on all these feeds set up while I was just a lazy jerk not doing anything. So.
Not even. You created the podcast, and it was pretty easy to move everything over to Anchor. So shout out to Anchor for hosting us. And yeah, like Jeff said, subscribe. We'll throw these clips on YouTube. We'll have the podcast on YouTube as well. And we're on Google Podcasts as well. I just got an alert. So we'll expand as we go. So thanks for joining us through episode 1. We really, really appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you. And, you know, as we approach the 1-year anniversary of Kobe's passing, this episode will launch one day prior to January 26th. So we just, you know, keep that in mind. It'll be a tough day, but it'll be interesting and, you know, entertaining to see all the tributes that will be thrown up that day.
There's going to be a lot. There's definitely going to be a lot. I'm actually going to run 8.24 miles for Kobe around LA. I'll put on a Kobe jersey to do so. It's going to be an emotional day for a lot of people. We didn't want to release a podcast on that specific day, even though it's going to be available. And people are going to grieve and remember him in their own way and their own right. And, you know, we just wanted to bring positivity to this day. And because it was a shock 12 months ago, and it was an emotional ride, and it still hurts for a lot of people, no more than the Bryant family and all the other families that were affected. So we just wanted to remember him in a very, very positive way of all basketball, which is so much joy for us.
Yep, absolutely. And I will, you throw out that you're going to be running 8.24 miles. I would say Kobe would tell you to run 24.8. So I will challenge you for 24.8.
I will. I'm going to go ahead and fail that challenge, Kobe. I'm sorry. I'm just getting into running too. This is my first really month of doing like a big challenge. So I don't want to push myself too much, but 24 is something I'll push myself to. That's a goal for me. So
Okay.
I'll get to 24.8 eventually.
Good enough.
If that's good enough for Jeff.
Okay. All right. Thanks. We'll talk soon. Thank you, everybody.
Absolutely. Bye-bye, guys.